Okay, we are on. All right, so this is for the 9 boys class. So I've gone over this topic with the 9 girls on the Wednesday lesson. This is for the boys for the 27th of March, period 1, history lesson. Okay, so we are still under the same heading of social legislation, which we've already done last lesson. Now, uh, please put the same heading in your book, social legislation. We've already done this, so do not start writing about the Immigration Restriction Act. We did that on the Monday lesson of week 9. We're moving on to the Friday lesson. Okay, so we went through the Immigration Act, Restriction Act of 1901 on Monday. We did some activities, and we spoke about how Australia was trying to preserve that white culture. Okay, and what they had to do to actually become an Australian or to pass into the country was they had to sit a dictation test at the time between 1901 and 1958. And we did some notes on this, and we actually looked at what a dictation test looks like. Then you were given some activities to do, and we summed that up. So under the same heading, please, so social legislation, please put the subheading. So social legislation is your main heading, and then the subheading is the harvester case. Okay, so we've got a couple more things to do. All right, harvester case. So here you can pause the video and you can actually start writing this down before I start explaining it. Okay, so hopefully you've paused it and you've written it all down. Now, in 1917, right, an arbitration court judge decided that wages at a Melbourne factory should be based on the cost of living for a worker and his family. Now, before we move on, what is the meaning of arbitration? Right? Arbitration basically means, right, or arbitration court judge, right? What they do is they actually hear both cases and they give the final decision. Okay, so they hear both cases. So in this case, it would be the Melbourne factory owner and the workers, and then they would hear both sides and they would actually make the ruling. And the ruling was that the cost of living, so that could be your rent, your groceries, whatnot, for a worker and his family, right? Would it be paid enough wages to cover that, right? So the wages of a worker should cover the cost of living. So rent, groceries, bills, things like that. All right? Continuing on. From then on, Australia's minimum wage was based on what was fair and reasonable rather than what the employer was offering. Now, this prevented the negative effects of capitalism. And we learnt about capitalism in week 3, and it's basically about equal opportunity and for anyone to actually start a business, they are given the freedom and the right to do that. Now, what the negative effect was, and we wrote this down, was in capitalism, just simply, there's that risk of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer because the rich would abuse their power to maybe withhold some wages to the workers and keep the profits for themselves. Okay, that's in simple terms, that's what a negative effect could be. This prevented that. Okay, so it's a very important social legislation in the history of Australia, and that is what the Harvester case did. The decision was made in the Commonwealth Court of Conciliation and Arbitration. And we already know what arbitration is. Now, what conciliation is? Arbitration, they give the ruling. Conciliation, so conciliation, they would actually suggest. They would suggest. Arbitration, they would give the ruling. Okay? Just a few years after Federation in 1901, as the laws of the new nation were being developed. Okay, so written that down. Now, continuing with the same heading, social legislation, same heading, please put the subheading, other social legislation. Okay, other social legislation. Now, on page 154, right, have a read of it and you'll see 3 other legislations there. Out of the 3, please write them down. The one that is most obvious would be the Pensioners Act. So please have a read of all 3 and summarize them in your books. Okay, and you'll see what the Pensioners Act is about. After that, please put the subheading source analysis, and you will go to page, I believe it is 155 and 166. So I'll write it down. 155 and 156. Sorry, I'm writing with the mouse. It's terrible. Let me rub that out. It's 156. And complete that in, as I always say, full sentence form. Okay. Now they're quite simple. They're quite simple sources. If you have any questions, please message me on Edmodo. Okay, and I'll help you from there on in. And that's about all there is left with the topic of making a nation. And next week we'll move on to some revision, just 2 lessons of revision. And on week 11 we will go on to World War I and II, or the topic is called Between the Wars. So that's a very fun topic. Thank you.